My name's Cheryl. I grew up with my mom, Sophia, in a small apartment on the edge of town. My dad left when I was 3. He didn't leave much behind, just a blurry memory and a lot of unanswered questions. Mom never said bad things about him, but the sadness in her eyes when his name came up told me everything. It was just the two of us, and she worked so hard to give me everything I needed. She worked long hours, even weekends. Sometimes, I'd come home from school and find her asleep on the couch, still in her work clothes, too tired to make it to bed. That was our life. Simple, tough at times, but filled with love. Seeing her sacrifice so much lit a fire in me. I wanted to make something of myself and make her proud. While other kids partied, I buried myself in books. My hard work paid off when I got a scholarship to study economics at State College. When I got my acceptance letter, Mom cried happy tears for the first time. "You did it, baby," she said, hugging me tightly. "You're going places." I just know it. College was a whole new world. For the first time, I was surrounded by kids who grew up with more than just the basics. It was a bit of a shock, but instead of letting it bother me, I used it as motivation. I worked even harder and graduated with honors. When I walked across the stage to get my diploma, Mom cheered louder than anyone else. The pride in her eyes made all the hard work worth it. But that was just the beginning. With my new degree in hand, I was ready to face whatever came next. I got a job as an economist at a big company in the city. It was time to start a new chapter. "You call me every week, okay?" Mom said as she helped me pack my old car. "And don't forget to eat your vegetables." I laughed and hugged her tight. "I promise, Mom. I'll make you proud." Life in the city was fast and busy. I worked hard, determined to prove myself. Long nights, early mornings, and endless spreadsheets became my routine. It was exhausting, but I loved the challenge. After just 3 years, I got a big promotion. "Wow, Cheryl," my coworker Charles said when I told him the news. "We've got to celebrate. Drinks on me tonight." I couldn't say no. That evening, a group of us went to Charles's favorite bar. The music was loud, the drinks kept coming, and for the first time in a while, I let myself relax. That's when I saw him, tall, dark-haired, with a smile that could light up a room. He was at the bar, and our eyes met over the rim of my glass. Before I knew it, he was walking over. "I'm Jerry," he said, holding out his hand. "You look like you're celebrating something." I smiled, still riding the high of my promotion, and maybe a little tipsy. "I am. Big promotion. I'm Cheryl, by the way." We talked all night. Jerry was charming, funny, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. By the time we exchanged numbers, I was already smitten. A week later, we had our first date. Then another. And another. 7 months flew by, and I was head over heels for him. One crisp autumn evening, Jerry proposed. We were in the park where we'd had our third date, surrounded by trees glowing with red and gold leaves. He got down on one knee and slipped a stunning diamond ring on my finger. It felt like a dream, a fairy tale come to life. But a week later, things took an unexpected turn. Jerry told me it was time to meet his parents. "They're excited to meet you," he said, but something about his smile didn't feel right. I should have known something was up when we drove up to a huge mansion. The lawn was perfect, the cars shiny and expensive. This was serious old money. "Your parents live here?" I asked quietly. Jerry just nodded and led me to the front door. Before we could even knock, the door opened, and an older couple stood there. They looked like they had stepped out of a fancy magazine. "Cheryl, these are my parents, Timothy and Janice," Jerry said. They gave me polite smiles, and I thought I caught an Italian accent. Inside, the house was like a museum. Antique furniture, priceless artwork, and everywhere I looked, there were portraits of stern-faced men and women in fancy, old-fashioned clothes. "Our ancestors," Janice said, noticing my stare. "All noble families from Italy. This one," she pointed to a particularly grim-looking man, "was a count in the royal court." I just nodded, completely out of my element. This wasn't my world. It felt like I'd stepped into another universe. "Shall we have dinner?" Timothy said, leading us to a dining room big enough for 30 people. I sat down and stared at the silverware in front of me. Forks and spoons of all shapes and sizes. It looked like a shiny minefield. When the first course arrived, I froze. Which fork was I supposed to use? I glanced at Jerry, panic rising in my chest. He gave me a small smile and nodded toward the outermost fork. I grabbed it, feeling like a kid pretending to be an adult. The whole time, I could feel Timothy and Janice watching me. Their looks weren't outright rude, but I could sense their judgment. I felt out of place and embarrassed, like I didn't belong. As I struggled through the meal, my mind drifted to my mom and our little kitchen table. We used to eat TV dinners and laugh about our day. I missed that warmth, that comfort. As the main course arrived, Janice locked her sharp eyes on me. "So, Cheryl," she said in a voice that sounded sweet but wasn't, "tell us about your family. What do your parents do?" I swallowed hard, feeling my face turn red. "Well, I was raised by my mom. She's a waitress." "And your father's?" Timothy asked, raising an eyebrow. He left when I was 3. "I don't really remember him," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. The silence that followed felt unbearable. Then, Janice pushed her chair back with a loud scrape and stood up. "This is unacceptable," she said, her accent getting thicker as her anger grew. "Jerry, darling, you cannot be serious about this girl?"
Her words hit me like a slap.
"Mother, please," Jerry started, but Janice cut him off sharply. "We are from an ancient Italian family. We have a reputation to uphold. We cannot allow our only son to marry someone off the street, someone without pedigree or proper origins." Timothy nodded in agreement. "Indeed. We expect our son to marry an equal, someone who can trace their lineage back at least 7 generations." He turned to me, his gaze icy. "Tell me, Cheryl, can you name your great-grandfathers?" I sat there, stunned, my mouth open but no words coming out. "I know my mom's parents' names," I finally managed, "but beyond that..." Timothy rolled his eyes, so hard it looked like they might fall out of his head. As I suspected, no sense of heritage, no respect for lineage. "That's enough." Jerry's voice broke the tension. "Cheryl is kind, smart, and hardworking. I love her, and I'm going to marry her. Your approval isn't required." Warmth spread through me at his words, but Janice's icy response quickly squashed it. "Oh, you'll marry her," she said with a sneer, "but only if she agrees to our conditions." "Conditions?" I echoed weakly. Timothy leaned forward, his cold eyes staring into mine. "If you are to be part of this family, you must act like it. You will obey us, learn our ways, and do everything in your power to match our standing in society. Is that clear?" Timothy leaned forward, his cold eyes staring into mine. "If you are to be part of this family, you must act like it. You will obey us, learn our ways, and do everything in your power to match our standing in society. Is that clear?" I looked at Jerry, hoping he'd back me up, but he just gave me an encouraging nod.
"It's not so bad, Cheryl," he said.
"They just want what's best for us." My head was spinning. This wasn't how I imagined my engagement would go, but I loved Jerry and wanted to make it work. So, even though my gut told me otherwise, I nodded. I understand. I'll do my best." Janice's lips curved into a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Excellent. You can start by learning the history of our illustrious Italian lineage. It's important to know where you come from, after all." I wanted to snap back that where I came from was a loving home with a mom who sacrificed everything for me. But instead, I just nodded again. The weeks after that awkward dinner were a blur. My future in-laws decided I needed a full transformation. "Etiquette and style courses," Janice announced one day, handing me a stack of brochures. "You'll need them if you want to fit in with our circle." So, on top of my full-time job, I spent evenings and weekends at endless classes. Learning how to use 18 different types of forks?
Check.
Perfecting the proper way to curtsy?
Got it.
Mastering the intricate steps of a waltz? I tried. Back straight, chin up, the dance instructor barked as I tripped through the moves. A lady of society must always appear graceful. I'd come home completely wiped out, feet aching, brain overloaded with rules and etiquette. Then I'd open my wedding planner and realize I still had a mountain of things to do. One night, my phone buzzed. It was Mom again. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hey, Mom. Everything's great," I said, forcing a cheerful tone. "The wedding plans are coming along nicely." "That's wonderful, sweetie," she said, and I could hear the pride in her voice. "I can't wait to meet Jerry and his family. Have you set up a dinner yet?" I winced, remembering the conversation I'd had with Jerry earlier that week. "Hey," I had said to him, "don't you think it's time you met my mom?" I'd brought it up one morning over coffee. "The wedding's getting closer. Don't you think it's time you met my mom?" Jerry barely looked up from his phone. "We'll meet at the wedding." "It's fine," he said, waving me off. Now, on the phone with Mom, I swallowed hard. "Not yet, Mom. Everyone's just so busy, you know. But soon, I promise." The next day, I tried again during another tense family dinner. "I was thinking," I said carefully, "maybe we could all have dinner with my mom soon. She's really excited to meet you." The silence was deafening. Then Janice let out a harsh laugh. "And how exactly do you imagine this gathering?" she asked, her voice full of disdain. Timothy joined in, speaking slowly, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "Cheryl, surely you understand. We're from different social circles. We have no intention of socializing with a waitress." I felt my face heat with anger and shame. How dare they talk about my mom like that? She was worth 10 of them. I opened my mouth to speak, but Jerry squeezed my hand under the table. "Let it go," he whispered. "Don't argue with them. It's not worth it." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. This wasn't right. None of this was right. But I loved Jerry, didn't I? And this was the price I had to pay to be with him. That night, as I lay in bed, tossing and turning, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing myself. Every etiquette lesson, every dismissed suggestion, every lie to my mom chipped away at who I was. The real Cheryl was slipping away. Finally, the big day arrived. Months of planning, etiquette lessons, and family history lectures had led to this moment. Standing in the bridal suite, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was polished, poised, and perfect, everything Janice and Timothy had wanted. But she didn't feel like me. "You look beautiful, honey," Mom said softly, her eyes filled with tears as she adjusted my veil. "I'm so proud of you." I forced a smile, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach.
Thanks, Mom.
"I'm just nervous, I guess." She squeezed my hand gently. "Everything will be fine. You'll see." If only she knew. The ceremony passed in a blur. The church was full of faces I didn't know. Jerry's side was packed with judges, politicians, and CEOs, what felt like half the city's elite. My side, by comparison, was tiny, just Mom and a handful of my college friends. When the reception started, it quickly became clear this wasn't going to be the joyful celebration I had dreamed of. Janice and Timothy were in their element, seated at the main table and surrounded by their high society friends. Meanwhile, I felt like I was just there to amuse them. "Cheryl, darling," Janice called out, her voice syrupy sweet, "be a dear and fetch us some more champagne. Oh, and some of those crab cakes. Chop chop." I froze, stunned. Was this really happening on my wedding day? But it didn't stop there. For the next hour, I found myself running back and forth, fetching drinks and snacks while trying not to trip over my long white dress. With every trip, I could feel Jerry's relatives watching me, their whispers and quiet laughs following me like a shadow. By the time I finally made it back to my seat, I was exhausted and on the verge of tears. Jerry was nowhere to be found, probably off mingling with some important guest. "It'll get better after the ceremony," I told myself. "Once we say our vows, they'll have to treat me like family, right?" But as if reading my mind, Janice's voice rang out across the room. "Cheryl," she called loudly, loud enough for everyone to hear, "as the new Julie daughter-in-law, it's your duty to serve our table for the entire evening. After all, the most important guests are seated here." Something inside me snapped. Months of frustration and humiliation came bubbling to the surface. "No," I said, my voice trembling. I will not, I said firmly. It's my wedding day, and there are waiters for that. The room went silent. Janice's face twisted with anger. How dare you, she hissed. You will do as you're told, and know your place. You ungrateful little nobody. You have no right to contradict me, a woman of breeding and pedigree. Fury and embarrassment burned inside me as I turned and stormed off to find Jerry. I spotted him at the bar, laughing with his college friends, a half-empty champagne glass in his hand. Jerry, I hissed, grabbing his arm. We need to talk.
Now.
He turned to me, his eyes slightly unfocused. What's wrong, babe? Can it wait? I'm in the middle of a story. Ignoring him, I dragged him to a quiet corner, my hands shaking. Your mother is treating me like a servant on our wedding day, and you're here drinking and laughing like nothing's wrong. Jerry's expression darkened. Are you serious right now? You're bothering me with this nonsense? I stared at him, stunned. Nonsense? Jerry, they're humiliating me in front of everyone. He rolled his eyes and swayed slightly. Oh, come on.
Just do what they ask.
It's not a big deal. You should be grateful they're even accepting you into the family. Grateful? I repeated, my voice filled with disbelief. Yeah, grateful, he sneered. Do you think I didn't have other options? Prettier girls, richer girls, girls from good families. I chose you, Cheryl. The least you could do is try to fit in. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stumbled back, feeling the ground shift beneath me. The man standing in front of me wasn't the Jerry I thought I knew. He wasn't the man I had agreed to marry. It's almost time for the ceremony, he said, glancing at his watch. Pull yourself together, and let's get this over with. As he walked away, I stood there frozen, tears welling up in my eyes. This was all wrong. Everything was wrong. Cheryl? Mom's voice broke through my thoughts. Honey, what's wrong? I turned to her, and the concern in her eyes broke the dam. Tears poured down my face as she pulled me into a hug. Oh, sweetie, she murmured, stroking my hair.
Talk to me.
What's going on? Between sobs, I finally let it out. I poured out everything to Mom. The humiliation, Jerry's cruel words, and how I'd spent months trying to change myself to fit into a world that clearly didn't want me. She listened quietly, her expression growing more serious with each word. When I finished, she held me by the shoulders and looked me straight in the eye. Cheryl, she said, her voice calm but firm, I need you to answer me honestly. Do you love Jerry? Do you really want to marry him? Her question hung heavy in the air. 7 months ago, I wouldn't have hesitated to say yes.
But now?
I shook my head slowly, the truth hitting me hard. No, I whispered. No, I don't. Mom nodded, her expression determined. Then it's time we end this charade. Before I could ask what she meant, she marched over to the DJ's booth and grabbed the microphone. The room was filled with a loud screech of feedback as everyone turned to look at her. Ladies and gentlemen, Mom's voice rang out, steady and strong. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have an important announcement. A little secret, if you will. The room went silent. Every eye was on her, including Janice and Timothy, who sat frozen at their table, champagne glasses in hand. Janice, Timothy, Mom said, her voice sharp and clear, or should I say, Isabella and Tim. Janice's face went pale, and Timothy turned bright red. What are you talking about? Janice stammered, her polished Italian accent slipping. Mom let out a cold laugh. Oh, come on, Isabella. Don't you recognize me? Sophia Edward. Positano High, class of '86. Gasps rippled through the crowd. That's right, Mom continued, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Your so-called noble hosts, the illustrious Julies? They're about as Italian as apple pie. Isabella here was my classmate in our tiny little hometown. And Timothy? He was the boy from the wrong side of the tracks who lived next door to us. The room erupted into murmurs as Mom's words sank in. I stared in amazement as Janice and Timothy seemed to shrink in their seats, their carefully built image cracking in front of everyone. Mom stood tall, her eyes blazing. I knew exactly who they were the moment I walked in. I recognized their voices, Mom said with a playful wink. Though I must say, that fancy Italian accent is new. They must have picked that up after the three of us moved to the big city to try and make it big. She paused, letting her words sink in. Funny how things work out, isn't it? I stayed true to myself, just an ordinary woman. But Isabella and Tim here? They reinvented themselves as Italian nobility. The room erupted with shocked whispers and bursts of laughter. I watched as realization dawned on the faces of the guests. The truth behind the Julie family's carefully crafted image was out. And you know what the kicker is? Mom's voice cut through the noise like a blade. These people, who made up their entire backstory and lied about their roots to climb the social ladder, had the nerve to look down on my daughter, to humiliate her and treat her like she's beneath them. Mom turned to face the crowd, her eyes blazing. Well, let me tell you something. There's nothing noble about lying. There's nothing elite about treating people like dirt. The only thing beneath anyone here is the behavior of those who think they're better than everyone else. The room fell silent. Slowly, heads began to turn toward Janice and Timothy. The admiration and respect they'd basked in earlier were gone, replaced by contempt and disgust. Janice and Timothy, their facade in shambles, started to stammer excuses. Their polished accents slipped away with every desperate word. "It's not what you think," Janice cried, her voice thick with a Midwest twang. "We just wanted to give our son a better life." Timothy added, his voice revealing a background far removed from luxury. Their pleas were ignored. The guests, many of whom had admired the Julie family for years, now looked away in disgust. Years of lies and fake airs crumbled in an instant. Amid the chaos, Jerry stormed toward me, his face red with anger. "You," he spat, pointing an accusing finger at me. "You've ruined everything. My life, my family's reputation. It's all destroyed because of you." I stared at him, this man I once thought I loved, and felt nothing. No pain, no regret. Just a profound sense of relief. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. It was time to let go of all of it. I turned to face the crowd, the chaos of the reception buzzing around me. In that moment, I found a strength I didn't know I had. "Everyone," I said, my voice steady and strong. "May I have your attention, please?" The room went silent as all eyes turned to me. "I have an announcement to make," I continued. "There will be no wedding today." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd, but I stood tall. I realized I made a mistake. I chose a man who was ashamed of where I come from. Someone who wanted me to change everything about myself just to fit into his world. I regret that I almost married someone so shallow and deceitful. With that, I reached up, removed my veil, and let it fall to the floor. I turned to my mom, who was smiling with pride, and said, "Let's go home, Mom." The fallout from that day was quick and brutal. The Julie family, once celebrated in high society, became outcasts overnight. Their carefully built connections disappeared, invitations stopped coming, and their so-called friends pretended they'd never known them. Last I heard, they sold their mansion and moved to another city, hoping to start fresh where their lies weren't known. As for me, life has a way of surprising you. A few months after the wedding that wasn't, I met Paul. He's a high school teacher from a working-class family like mine. On our first date, I told him everything about the Julie disaster. Instead of being put off, he laughed and said, "Sounds like you dodged a bullet there." We've been dating ever since, taking things slow. His parents are kind, down-to-earth people who welcomed me with open arms. No etiquette lessons needed, no lectures about family lineage, just warmth and acceptance. I'm back at my old job, working hard and earning respect the honest way. Mom and I are closer than ever. She's my hero, my rock, and I make sure she knows it every single day.